on yet another Manic Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectly said. And it just shows the sensitivity to things coming out of the White House.
And
certainly,
by the way.
The Bengals. I think what's interesting is that you did see selling right at the open, understand because of the tariffs. And then as things rolled back, at least for Mexico, at least for another month, it just shows again how hypersensitive investors are about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if we get
any
information when we get information about Canada and the call that the president has had with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, how that changes the picture, given what we heard from President Sheinbaum of Mexico earlier in today's session, and the way we saw that reversal after that information came from her, that the U.S. had held off for a month.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of wait and see moments right now. But what we can say is that a lot of people are flocking to safe havens. Certainly, if you look at the S&P 500, you see that in the sectors that are gaining, and also gold prices are higher as well. And Treasury is getting a little bit of a lift.
Just in that back end. But it was interesting, last week, JP Morgan Trading Desk said they saw a lot of retail buying, and we did see a buy the dip scenario today. I mean, remember futures yesterday? You look at that intraday chart of the S&P minis for the futures, and I mean, that was a huge dip that we've come back from.
Yeah, a little bit of a repeat of what we saw last week, of course, after that deep seek scare. We should point out we do get some earnings after the bell from Palantir and NXP Semiconductors, as well as Clorox. As for the market moves today, we're well off the lows of the day, but still in the red, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by more than 100 points, or about 0.3%. It takes a while for these numbers to settle, but it looks like the S&P 500 is going to settle just below 6,000, down roughly 46 points, or about 0.8%. Though we should point out it was down as much as 2% on the day earlier in the session. The Nasdaq Composite down about 1.2%. The Nasdaq 100 down 0.8%, while the Russell 2000 will close out the day lower by 1.3%.
All right, Romaine, going to the S&P 500, most names in the index are lower today. Scarlet, we've got 323 names losing ground today, 179 to the upside.
All right, let's take a look at the IMAP, which shows how the sectors performed. And what you'll see is the biggest sector in the S&P 500, tech, losing 1.8% on the day. Consumer discretionary, which includes automakers, home builders, and retailers, down 1.4%. So those are names, certainly retailers and automakers, that would be affected by tariffs. Industrials also down 1%. Your green slices of that pie include consumer staples, utilities, energy stocks, typically more defensive. They have some dividends to protect them from all the headline risk.
All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers. There's a lot of red on that IMAP chart. So my gainers are not necessarily names we talk about a lot here, but IDEX Laboratories, that one finishing the day with about 11% gain. It's a $38 billion market cap life science and diagnostics company. It makes products for vet offices, so veterinarians. Top gainer in both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 on this Monday, rallying after posting fourth quarter profit and revenue that topped estimates, driven by the companion animal group diagnostics, recurring revenue gains. That's straight from the company. Hey, here's another one.
Animals? That's pets, right?
So basically it's vets and pets.
All right.
All right, just trying to sound, I don't know, whatever. All right, Stratasys. Let's get to that one. Another one. Again, not a name we talk about, but up 21%, rallying the most in more than 3 years intraday. It's a small cap company, folks. I will point that out. Makes 3D printers, up after Fortissimo Capital agreed to buy 14% of the 3D printing company. So that was an outperformer here. And then Triumph Group. This one was up almost 34% in today's session. It's a $1.9 billion market cap aircraft parts manufacturer, jumping the most ever. Private equity firm Warburg Pincus and Berkshire Partners agreeing to take the aircraft parts and services supplier private for about $3 billion, including debt. So definitely some outperformance there.
Okay, let's look at underperformance. And we go no further to some of the biggest companies in the S&P 500. Apple shares down 3.4%, actually down this year. Close to 9% at this point. Stocks did sell off, ones that were most exposed to tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. They did bounce off their lows after we got the delay on tariffs on goods from Mexico. Apple certainly one of those companies with a huge exposure to China, not just from the perspective of sales to China. We've been covering that closely over the last few weeks as concerns about iPhone sales have has been an issue there. But also, of course, when it comes to the manufacturing of these products. Bank of America out with a note. It says, though, that they see the potential tariffs on impact as manageable with limited impact on earnings, saying that they only see a 5-cent EPS impact from the new 10% tariffs imposed on China if we assume that 50% of those devices can be sourced from other countries. Tesla shares falling today by more than 5%. This sort of a double dose of not so great news for Tesla. And the tariff news certainly sending a scare throughout the auto industry. I'm going to talk about GM next. Even though cars that are made in the U.S. by Tesla are sold in the U.S., there's not a huge impact there. The concern is about retaliatory tariffs about those U.S.-made cars sold in other parts of the world, or perhaps targeted tariffs to cars sold in other parts of the world. Then there was also this news out of California, Tesla registering fewer cars in California in all 4 quarters of 2024. Sales of its Model 3 plunged 36% for the year. It could be, one of the reasons could be the result of the active role of Elon Musk in the U.S. government and during the U.S. election, as people were thinking about their next auto. Speaking of autos, General Motors shares falling today. We did see shares of automakers with big exposure to Mexico, Canada, and China being affected by the tariff threat. RBC came out with a note that said in its worst case scenario that Trump's Mexico and Canada tariffs could result in double-digit earning hits to the big 3, including General Motors.
Can I just add another honorable mention on there? Was the drop that you saw in BlackRock today. This news kind of got buried here, but Vanguard Group cutting its fees down to basically next to nothing here, and that really slammed a lot of those big asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, and Invesco.
Was it 7 basis points for Vanguard?
On average, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's huge. That's huge. All right, going to the bond market, guys. We've been talking about it all day, but you didn't really see that safe haven buying in the back end that you might have expected on a day like today. But that front end really taking a hit, because that's where you're going to see the readjustment of Fed policy. We're now pricing in just about 40 basis points of cuts so far for this year, Romaine.
Palantir earnings crossing the wire. Their fourth quarter numbers look like a beat here. Adjusted EPS at 14 cents a share. The street was looking for 11 cents a share. Revenue $827.5 million. The street was looking for roughly $776 million. Here's your forecast going forward. The first quarter revenue numbers, $858 million to $862. That's the range. The lower end of that range, well above what the street was looking for on average. And for the full year, 2025, it sees revenue of $3.74 billion to $3.76. The low end of that range, once again, above what the street was looking for. You see those shares getting a nice pop here in the after-hour session, up about 8%.
And worth mentioning that this is a company that's posted revenue growth in the fourth quarter of 36%. So a fast-growing company, but also rich valuations, right? It gained 392% over the past 12 months. And if you look at the valuations, and I know this is a stock that doesn't trade on valuations, but trailing PE 400, forward PE 181. Carol.
Well, that's what I was going to say, right? It was so much about it, and it looks like the company is delivering, because you are seeing it really pop here in the aftermarket. But you got right to it. You know, the expectations, the valuations around this one, if it wasn't going to deliver, you could have assumed that investors were going to be pretty disappointed. But that outlook seems pretty upbeat.
Going through the press release, looking for commentary from Alex Karp, who's the co-founder and CEO of Palantir. He says that the business results continue to astound, demonstrating our deepening position at the center of the AI revolution. He says our early insights surrounding the commoditization of LLMs have evolved from theory to fact. Sort of shout out that the software that is on top of the LLMs, an important play for them at least.
Yeah, also just taking a look in terms of their adjusted operating margins in general. Some analysts were highlighting the fact that their margins could be looking at some tough comps, and so thinking about some margin pressure because of that, and also given that customization required for some of their new products. But it doesn't appear that we've seen that so far.
All right, so we got Palantir up about 14% here in the aftermarket. We'll continue to watch any other headlines that come across on that. In the meantime, I'm thinking about the Super Bowl. Excuse me, this weekend. Sorry, I got a little choked up here. But you know what? You kind of don't have to wait for the big bucks, because you can kind of find them if you are a high school player, a really standout high school player. And this is a story from the Wall Street Journal. It talks specifically about Adidas naming a star baseball shortstop as his newest big name endorser. This whole story gets into folks that are being pulled out of high school. They're not maybe even eligible to vote, but they're getting named name, image, likeness. They are like signing some really big deals with some really well-known companies.
Yeah, 40 state high school associations in the U.S., according to the Journal, now allow their students to sign these NIL deals. Texas is a holdout, even though high school football is so important in Texas.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, U.S. sports, youth sports, I should say, just got a lot more cutthroat competitive with NIL at a younger age. The other story we've been tracking, speaking of the Super Bowl, is Robinhood launching Super Bowl event contracts for retail traders. So if you want to place bets on the outcome of the Super Bowl, you want to kind of tune out overall news, political news, even market craziness, here's your chance to go bet on more sports through Robinhood.
Sports.
I just want to eat, nachos and watch the game.
Wait,
That's all
Carol,
I'm gonna do.
you're from New Jersey. Are you rooting for the Eagles? Are you close enough?
No,
that was
totally
fast.
Kansas City.
Also,
Are you kidding?
Is it because of
There's
Taylor
no way,
Swift?
Carol, he's
I'm a
not.
Giant family all the way. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Palantir up about 12.5% here in the aftermarket, so certainly something to watch into the Tuesday trade. That is our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.